A case that will forever terrify me is the unsolved disappearance of the Springfield Three. Because what do you mean 3 women all disappeared from one house in the middle of the night without leaving behind one single clue? No sign of a struggle outside of the front porch light being shattered. Everything was exactly the way they had left it, yet 3 entire women just gone. That was 34 years ago, yet this is an unsolved case that many people still talk about because nothing about it makes any sense. This is the disturbing disappearance of the Springfield Three, and it's one that genuinely makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. So let's talk about it. This is Cheryl Levitt. She was a 47-year-old hairdresser who lived at 1717 East Delmar Street in Springfield, Missouri. She lived here with her 19-year-old daughter named Susie, and they were super close. Everyone who knew them said they had such a loving relationship, and by all accounts, life was pretty normal for them. They moved into this house in the spring of 1992, and outside of some pretty disturbing prank phone calls, this was their little oasis. On June 6, 1992, Susie and one of her best friends, Stacy McCall, graduated from high school. And it was a day that should have marked the beginning of the rest of their lives. But within 24 hours, Susie, Stacy, and Cheryl would all vanish into thin air, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. So the 2 girls graduated at around 4 p.m. that day, and the ceremony was being held at Missouri State University's campus. In the audience was Cheryl, a proud mother watching her only daughter graduate. After the ceremony, their high school was hosting an all-night locked-in party inside the school, which a lot of people attended. But Susie and Stacy declined as they were going to a couple of other parties that night. The first stop of the night was to their friend's house in Battlefield. Her name was Janelle Kirby. Janelle's family was hosting a big family dinner with a bunch of out-of-town relatives staying the night, so it was a pretty big celebration. After dinner, Susie, Stacy, and Janelle went to Janelle's neighbor's house who was hosting the first party of the night. The Kirbys made sure to tell Susie's mom Cheryl exactly where the girls were so that if she needed anything, she knew where to call, but she never did. Cheryl was even invited to the Kirbys' dinner, but she decided to stay home instead and paint and varnish some furniture. The last time Cheryl was ever heard from was around 11:15 that night. She had talked to one of her friends on the phone talking about how she was just staying in and having a cozy night in her bedroom, and while the other 2 girls went about their night having fun, this would be the last time Cheryl would ever be heard from again. So fast forward to after the first party. Once that was over, Janelle, Stacy, and Susie all carpooled to some other little parties in Springfield. As the night went on, the girls put together this big plan for all of them and their friends to meet up the next morning at 8 a.m. to go to Whitewater, which was a water park in Branson, Missouri. The plan was really set in stone, and it was going to be a really fun way to kick off post-graduation life. And at this party, everyone seemed normal. The girls were having fun, rekindling old friendships, and making plans for the next few days, so nothing out of the ordinary. Just before 2 a.m., the last party that the girls were at was busted by Springfield police, so they all carpooled back to Janelle's house where they initially planned to stay the night. But since Janelle's house was packed full with her out-of-town relatives, Stacy and Susie decided to actually just head back to Susie's house to spend the rest of the night with her mom Cheryl. This worked out great because Susie was super excited to show Stacy this brand new king-size waterbed she just got. And as the 2 were leaving, Janelle's mom heard Susie say, quote, "Follow me to my house," end quote, in which Stacy replied, quote, "Okay, I will." End quote. It's assumed that they both did in fact make it back to Susie's house as both of their cars were parked in the driveway, as well as the rest of their personal belongings. But what happened after the girls got home has never been explained. This brings us to June 7th, 1992. It was now 9 a.m., so an hour past the time Stacy and Susie were supposed to meet up with their friends to go to the water park. This really worried Janelle because they were both really responsible and wouldn't just leave her without saying anything. So Janelle and her boyfriend actually went to Susie and Cheryl's home at 1717 East Delmar, expecting to find them there. Janelle noticed the front door was unlocked, so she went in, but absolutely nobody was there. This seemed really weird to her because all of their cars were still parked out front. Nothing really seemed out of the ordinary besides the front porch light being shattered. The bulb itself was still intact, but the glass lampshade that covered it was what was broken. So the next detail I'm about to say is a little odd, but I guess Janelle was barefoot at the time, so she and her boyfriend decided to sweep up the broken glass that was on the front porch and throw it away. It was an innocent thing they tried to do, but we would later find that this action would possibly destroy any potential evidence, as this was an active crime scene. As Janelle was roaming the house, she found Susie and Cheryl's pet Yorkie, Cinnamon, who seemed really agitated. And as Janelle was about to leave the house, a series of phone calls came through on the home phone, so Janelle answered. She said this person sounded like a teen guy, and he was saying some really disturbing sexual things, on top of profusely cussing. Every time the phone rang, it was this unidentified guy, and Janelle would hang up right away because what he was saying was very jarring. At the time though, Janelle really didn't think much of it because she remembered Susie complaining about similar disturbing prank phone calls ever since she and her mom had moved into the house in that spring. So without finding anyone, Janelle and her boyfriend left, and instead of going to Whitewater, they went to a local water park instead. On top of not showing up to the water park, Susie was supposed to call her close friend and co-worker Nigel, but she never did. When he showed up to find out what was going on though, something immediately stood out to him. Nigel described Susie as a creature of habit and said that every single day she would always park her car in the same exact spot in the driveway, which was under the carport. That morning when people started showing up to look for the three women, Susie's car wasn't parked in her usual spot. It was further up the driveway, which was not normal. Although alarm bells started ringing, Nigel was really hoping this would have a good explanation. Maybe someone else was just parked in her spot under the carport when she and Stacy arrived home that night after the party. But this is only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the disturbing mystery surrounding this case. A few hours later, Stacy's mom begins to panic as well. She wasn't able to get a hold of her, and she knew a couple of employees at Whitewater that confirmed that neither of the girls ever showed up and checked in. So Stacy's mom actually went to Cheryl's home just like Janelle, and she found the door unlocked too. When she let herself inside, their Yorkie Cinnamon came barreling towards her. Poor Cinnamon was just going crazy inside the house, like she was barking and crying like something was really wrong. Stacy's mom continued walking through the house and found something odd. All three of the women's purses were sitting on the floor of Susie's bedroom. Cheryl had a $900 cash deposit from her salon still inside her purse, and what's super creepy is that she found Stacy's pants, socks, and jacket folded neatly inside the room. These were the clothes her daughter was wearing just the night before, and Stacy didn't have any other clothes on her besides this outfit. But what's creepy is that her shirt and underwear were missing from the scene. As creepy as it was though, it literally looked as if all three women just stepped outside and would be right back, like time was frozen still. There were recently used makeup wipes from the girls sitting next to their jewelry and keys, and Cheryl's cigarettes were still inside the house. That tiny detail doesn't seem that weird until you learn that Cheryl was a chain smoker, and she never left anywhere without having her cigarettes on her. What really disturbs me though, which I'm sure is just a coincidence, is that the book Oh, the Places You'll Go by Dr. Seuss was sitting on Susie's headboard. I don't know too many 19-year-olds who still have those books just laying around. But then again, this could just be a red herring, so to speak. The lights were off in Susie's bedroom, but the TV was on, just blaring static. It's likely the girls maybe watched a movie or something that night when they got home and just forgot to turn the TV off, which caused the static, but it's still really creepy to me. It also creeps Stacy's mom out to the point where she was now in full-blown panic mode. So she called the police directly from Cheryl and Susie's home phone to report the three women missing. After she called, she noticed that there was a message left on their answering machine, so she listened to it. What's super frustrating is that the voicemail was accidentally erased after she listened to it just that one time. But Stacy's mom described it as incredibly strange and even threatening. I guess it was common back then for answering machines in the 90s to erase the message after it played once, but it's just really unfortunate in this case because police believe that this message may have provided a clue and was possibly linked to the three women's disappearance. One thing they did clarify though was that they don't believe this specific voicemail was related to the many prank phone calls the home had received prior. So on top of the 911 call being placed roughly 16 hours after Cheryl, Susie, and Stacy were last seen, the crime scene was also horrendously contaminated. Not only did Janelle and her boyfriend clean up potential evidence, and Stacy's mom erasing that creepy voicemail, after the women were reported missing, about 20 of their worried friends and family showed up to the home to tidy up. Even though they were actively missing at this point, I'm sure they thought that they would just show back up and that nothing was really wrong. So they cleaned up. They emptied ashtrays, washed coffee cups. I mean, anything you can think of to clean, they probably did it. By the time Springfield police arrived on the scene, several people were just walking in and out of the house and yard, and the front door was wide open, so the crime scene was very contaminated, and any potential evidence left behind was just destroyed. Based on early testimony though, and from their own investigation, there was really no sign of a struggle except for that one broken front porch light. Cheryl's bed looked slept in, and one of the window blinds was awkwardly bent, which kind of stood out too. Everything of Susie, Cheryl's, and Stacy's was left behind, including driver's licenses, money, keys, jewelry, medicine, and even poor little Cinnamon. Police say the women were most likely abducted, and that little Cinnamon was likely the only witness to their disappearance. Investigators were really hoping that these women would just show back up, but in the following days, all three women had appointments and work that they needed to show up to, but They didn't. It was radio silence. This kickstarted a massive search for them, which included hundreds of volunteers, police, tracking dogs, and even helicopters. But it was like they just vanished into thin air. Literally no sign of them was ever found, not even the clothes that they were wearing that night. This was a really high-profile case at the time, so everyone knew about it, and it didn't take long for a possible lead to come in. Around the time of their disappearance, multiple people witnessed a brown Dodge van driving near the home. It seemed out of place, and a couple people even saw who they thought could be Susie driving the van, looking absolutely terrified. Some even claimed to have heard a man yelling at her from the inside of the van. Although this seemed like a good lead, this brown van was never tracked down, and it ultimately led nowhere. In December of 1992, a man called the America's Most Wanted hotline with information about the Springfield Three's disappearance. I guess this was prime knowledge that no one should have known unless they committed the crime. But as the switchboard operator tried to transfer the call to the Springfield Police Department, the call disconnected. As a result, Springfield PD pleaded publicly for this man to come forward and tell them this information, but he never did. A few years later, this case would be turned upside down once again with some pretty disturbing information. So kind of tying into the brown van sighting, a man named Chuck Kassler commented on a blog post about this case with some pretty startling information. Chuck went on to say that he was around 17 years old when these disappearances took place, and he may have witnessed the women being abducted. That night, Chuck and one of his friends snuck out into the woods near Winoka Camp, which also just so happened to be near Cheryl and Susie's home, aka the crime scene. Chuck went on to say that he and his friend heard screams and crying coming from inside the house, and then they saw 3 women being loaded off of a brown van. He said he then saw horrible things being done to them near Winoka Camp before he and his friend took off. Chuck's comment attracted a lot of attention because it really lined up with the brown van sighting, but a lot of people didn't believe him for a few reasons. I guess the road to Winoka Camp is really narrow, so a large brown van like the one everyone saw likely wouldn't have fit on that back road. Winoka Camp was also a super popular spot for people to go and hang out, especially on graduation night. There should have been more people there who likely would have seen the same thing as Chuck, and it's also just a really risky spot to commit a crime. People also question why Chuck nor his friend ever said anything to police, or anyone at all for that matter, until years later. He said he was scared and that's why, but some people think the fact that he didn't try to help or report this to anyone is sketchy. Regardless, not long after Chuck made this comment about this case, he ended his own life, which is another weird aspect to this case. In 1997, Cheryl and Susie were officially declared legally dead, even though none of them have ever been found. Fast forward to 2007. This is when investigators received a disturbing tip. The tip was that the women's bodies were buried in the foundation of the south parking garage at Cox Hospital. So Kathy Baird, who is a crime reporter, teamed up with a mechanical engineer to scan the corner of the parking garage with ground-penetrating radar. When they did, they shockingly found 3 anomalies roughly the same size, and this was consistent with a gravesite location. 2 of the anomalies were parallel and 1 was perpendicular. So this seems like a great lead, right? Well, Springfield police say that this tip came from a psychic or someone who had a dream about this case. And although 3 anomalies were found there was no logical reasoning behind this theory, no physical evidence. And it's been reported that this parking garage began construction about a year after the Springfield 3 went missing. So with all of that combined, Springfield PD has refused to tear this down or dig anything up to investigate. They say it's too spendy to do all of this on nothing, and that this isn't a credible enough lead. Although it is risky and costly to do this, and the timeline seems just a hair off, part of me wonders if the women have really been buried there this entire time. Sadly though, nothing has been done about it, and all 3 of them remain missing. And although we don't know what exactly happened to them or who was responsible, there are a few theories and suspects. Theory number 1 is that they were all abducted, which is likely the case. But how and why is the question. Did someone follow the girls home from one of the parties that night? Did one of them get abducted leaving the Kirby residence and then forced to go home? And then all 3 of them were abducted just because? Was it a targeted kidnapping? If so, why did all 3 of them go missing then? Or did someone break into the home when it was just Cheryl there, and then the girls walked in on it while the crime was being committed? Or was this just a random break-in/robbery that just happened to escalate? Either way, why was there absolutely no sign of a struggle or any blood left behind? How did all 3 of them vanish all at once? It seems like it would take more than one person to overpower all 3 of them without leaving any evidence behind. But with this theory, there are a few suspects. Suspect number 1 is Dustin Rekla, Susie's ex-boyfriend. A few months before they disappeared, Dustin broke into a Springfield mausoleum and stole $30 worth of gold fillings from a human skull. After he was caught, Susie gave statements against him to the police, and she was also going to be a probable witness in court. heart. This seems like a reason that he could have wanted revenge against her, but it just doesn't make sense why he would kidnap the other 2 women. But Dustin and the 2 friends that helped him in the robbery were in the area the night the women disappeared. So there's that. Suspect number 2 is Larry Hall, a suspected serial killer and convicted kidnapper and rapist. Larry would often travel around the Midwest for historical reenactments of the Civil War. He is believed to have abducted, tortured, and killed dozens of girls and women. On the morning and afternoon of June 6th, Larry had 2 battle reenactments at Wilson's Creek National Battlefield, which is 5 minutes away from the Kirby residence where Susie and Stacy were at that night. After Larry was arrested for another vicious crime, a former FBI agent actually went undercover and befriended him in prison. Larry confided in him a bunch of really disturbing details about his several murders that only the killer would know. He also kept a map of where all of his victims were abducted and killed. But sadly, the FBI agent blew his cover, and Larry destroyed this map before anyone could grab it. So it's not known if the Springfield 3 were included in this or not, although some of the dates did line up. Suspect number 3 is a man named Robert Craig Cox. He is also a convicted kidnapper and robber, and he claimed to know that the 3 women had been killed, but that their bodies would never be found. Robert was living in Springfield at the time of the disappearances, and he was even interviewed when this case first broke. He gave conflicting alibis, so police don't know if he's telling the truth, or if he just wanted attention by giving false statements about this case. He has no real credibility, so again, nothing is really tying him to this case. But Robert did say that once his mom dies, he will give up the location of the women's bodies, which is really sad. As of today, this case remains unsolved, but it's definitely one of those stories that makes you question what the heck could have possibly happened. It's one thing for one person to vanish into thin air, but 3 people all at the same time? That's terrifying, and not one theory really makes any sense. But it's now been 34 years, and whatever really happened to the Springfield 3 that night remains a mystery.